It all started with something so small it almost felt silly. A minor rule in the HOA handbook, one of those things you skim past, thinking it doesn't matter. My kids had set up a lemonade stand in front of our house. Bright yellow signs, a little folding table, and two giggling kids just trying to make a few bucks on a summer afternoon. But what happened next was something no parent could ever imagine. I never thought a simple neighborhood rule would turn into a nightmare that would shake my entire family and the community. The HOA, the same board that hosted block parties and holiday decorating contests, claimed we were in serious violation. But instead of a warning or a fine, they took it further way too far. That night, my kids vanished. I was told they were safely relocated for the good of the neighborhood. Can you imagine? A group of strangers using made-up authority to rip your children away, all because of a lemonade stand. The panic, the confusion, the helplessness, it all hit me at once. And the deeper I dug, the darker the truth became. This wasn't just about my kids. It was about control, about power, and about an HOA board that believed they were above the law. They thought no one would fight back. They thought I'd fold. But they underestimated what a parent will do when someone messes with their family. I wasn't just going to get my kids back, I was going to bring the entire board to justice. And just when I thought I had it all figured out, I found something buried in the HOA's files, something even worse than I imagined. What I discovered next changed everything. I always thought HOAs were just about lawn heights and mailbox colors. Ours had always seemed strict, but nothing out of the ordinary. The president, Mr. Darnell, was the kind of man who smiled too wide, but never really looked you in the eye. He'd send letters if your trash bins were out 10 minutes late or if your grass grew half an inch too long. But nothing prepared me for what I was about to uncover. After my kids were taken, I went to the police. They said it was a civil matter, tied up in local bylaws and custody terms I'd supposedly agreed to by living in the neighborhood. That made no sense. There were no signatures, no consent. Just a pile of technical jargon used to hide something twisted. My wife and I turned our home inside out, looking for any paperwork we might have missed, anything that could explain how this could even happen legally. But everything just led to dead ends, except one name kept coming up: the Family Preservation Clause. It wasn't in the printed HOA booklet, but it showed up in a digital file buried deep in the association's online records. That clause mentioned protective relocation rights for children in hostile domestic zones, a term the board had apparently applied to us based on a neighborhood complaint about unsupervised minors conducting commercial activity. I was stunned. All of this because two kids were selling lemonade. The more I asked questions, the more the board clammed up. Neighbors stopped answering their doors. I started noticing the same black SUV slowly driving by my house at night. Cameras I never installed blinked red on light poles. That's when I knew I wasn't just dealing with petty HOA drama anymore. I was up against something bigger. I always thought HOAs were just about lawn heights and mailbox colors. Ours had always seemed strict, but nothing out of the ordinary. The president, Mr. Darnell, was the kind of man who smiled too wide but never really looked you in the eye. He'd send letters if your trash bins were out 10 minutes late or if your grass grew half an inch too long. But nothing prepared me for what I was about to uncover. After my kids were taken, I went to the police. They said it was a civil matter, tied up in local bylaws and custody terms I'd supposedly agreed to by living in the neighborhood. That made no sense. There were no signatures, no consent. Just a pile of technical jargon used to hide something twisted. My wife and I turned our home inside out, looking for any paperwork we might have missed, anything that could explain how this could even happen legally. But everything just led to dead ends, except one name kept coming up: the Family Preservation Clause. It wasn't in the printed HOA booklet, but it showed up in a digital file buried deep in the association's online records. That clause mentioned protective relocation rights for children in hostile domestic zones, a term the board had apparently applied to us based on a neighborhood complaint about unsupervised minors conducting commercial activity. I was stunned. All of this because 2 kids were selling lemonade. The more I asked questions, the more the board clammed up. Neighbors stopped answering their doors. I started noticing the same black SUV slowly driving by my house at night. Cameras I never installed blinked red on light poles. That's when I knew I wasn't just dealing with petty HOA drama anymore. I was up against something bigger. I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. My phone started glitching, calls dropped mid-sentence, and strange texts popped up, then disappeared. I was being watched, no doubt about it, but all I cared about was getting my kids back. I kept digging into the HOA's files, combing through archived minutes from board meetings, financial records, even real estate transfer forms. That's when I stumbled on something that made my stomach drop. Dozens of line items labeled as community safety operations. The amounts were massive, far beyond what a neighborhood would need for simple security. I followed the money trail to a private firm the board had been paying for years. They called themselves Neighborhood Integrity Services. More I looked, the more it became clear this was a shell company. And the man behind it, Mr. Darnell himself. He'd been funneling HOA dues into this fake operation and using it to justify extreme actions, like surveilling families, issuing threats, and apparently removing children under vague protection protocols. At this point, I stopped caring about staying polite. I went to a former board member who'd quietly resigned last year. After a long silence, she finally spoke. Her voice shook when she said, "You're not the first family they've done this to, but you might be the last if you keep going." She told me the board had become a kind of self-governing group, operating like a shadow authority. They used fear and legal loopholes to control residents and silence anyone who pushed back. I recorded everything, every conversation, every file, every hidden policy. But before I could bring it to light, someone broke into my garage, not to steal, but to leave a message. Spray painted across the back wall in thick red paint. "Back off or lose more than your kids." That's when I realized this wasn't just about rules anymore. It was war. I stood there in the dark, staring at that wall. Those words burned into my brain. Back off or lose more than your kids. That wasn't a warning. It was a threat. And it meant they were watching not just my house, but every move I made. I moved my family to a friend's place the same night and went completely offline. No phones, no internet, nothing that could be tracked. But before I left, I made copies of everything and hid them in 3 separate locations. If they wanted to play dirty, I was ready. Just when I thought I had uncovered the worst of it, something even more chilling surfaced. A contact I had in the county clerk's office called me late one evening. She whispered, "Your kids aren't listed in the missing persons system anymore." I thought I'd misheard her. "What do you mean?" I asked. She replied, "According to the file, they've been legally placed in temporary guardianship with HOA consent." My blood ran cold. That wasn't just illegal, it was impossible. But somehow, the HOA had pushed documents through a private court channel that bypassed family court entirely. They had people on the inside. Judges, social workers, even officers. This was way deeper than a corrupt neighborhood board. It was an organized system. Then came the second twist. I managed to get my hands on a blurry low resolution photo taken outside a gated property hours from our neighborhood. In it, my son was standing next to someone I recognized instantly, Mr. Darnell's wife. She didn't work with the HOA. She ran a wellness retreat for children dealing with unstable home environments. The whole operation was off. The books, unlicensed and according to neighbors near the property heavily guarded. That's when it hit me. My kids weren't just taken, they were being kept, and used. For what? I didn't know yet. But I was done waiting. I drove out to that so-called retreat under the cover of night. Not sure what I'd find or if I'd even get past the gate, but luck was on my side. A delivery van was pulling in just as I arrived, and I slipped through behind it, heart pounding, hands shaking. The place looked nothing like a wellness center. It was a fenced compound with cameras on every corner and no signs. No names, just a few cottages and a large building in the center. I parked behind a shed and crept through the trees until I reached a side window. That's when I saw them. My kids safe but pale and quiet, sitting in a room with other children, supervised by two unfamiliar adults. Relief hit me like a wave, but I couldn't move yet. I needed proof. And I needed help. I used a small spy cam I'd taped to my chest to capture footage of the facility. The kids and the woman I now knew was more than just Mr. Darnell's wife. Turns out, she was listed under a different name. On state records connected to a string of nonprofits flagged for child relocation fraud. I sent everything to a federal contact I'd made through a friend in investigative journalism. Within 24 hours, an official task force raided the retreat, the bourgeois. In the weeks that followed, the truth unraveled piece by piece. The files found in that hidden room connected dozens of HOAs to the same network, all tied together by shell companies like Neighborhood Integrity Services. It turned out they were using HOA rules as cover targeting families they labeled non-compliant, often just because they questioned authority or didn't fit the image certain board members wanted. What happened to us wasn't a one-off. It was part of a pattern that had gone unchecked for years, thanks to the footage and records I collected, along with statements from former board members and neighbors who finally spoke up. A full-scale investigation was launched. Several high-ranking officials were indicted, and stricter oversight laws for homeowners associations were proposed across multiple counties. My kids, thankfully, are healing. We're in therapy, taking it one day at a time and slowly trying to get back to normal. They sleep with the lights on now. I don't blame them. As for our neighborhood, the entire board was replaced. New leadership is transparent, and the ridiculous rules that led to all of this gone. But we didn't stay. We moved to a quiet place in the country where my kids can run free, build lemonade stands, and just be kids without someone writing them up for it. I never imagined something as small as a lemonade stand would turn into a fight against a hidden system of abuse and control. But that's the thing about power. When it hides behind polite smiles and official titles, it's easy to miss until it's too late. If you're part of an HOA, ask questions, know the rules, and most importantly, know your rights. Because no one, not even a neighborhood board, should ever have the power to take your children away.